Hello, Model Railroaders. It's Steve87. I'm redoing the timestamp again on this because this is a continuation from yesterday, from the last video. When I actually filmed this, I didn't stop. So today we're going to go ahead and take all of those materials and start building walls with them. So let's see what we do. So first thing I'm going to do is make up my 60-foot jig so that I know how far I got to go. And we may make some more things out of this later. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here is setting up my area that says that it's 60 feet long. So each one of these walls is 60 feet long. It took me a little bit because you have to try to get those straight edges done here correctly. In the meantime, before I got all this, I actually cut a bunch of the 2x4s up to 16 inches, which I later found out I needed to go back to 12 inches. Or 12 feet on them instead of 16 feet. So I'm setting up this wall jig to make sure that all of my pieces fit correctly, so that I get enough of the bars, that I get enough of the poles, and that everything kind of fits the way it's supposed to. So the first thing I'm going to do once I get my 60 foot up there, so that I know that it's 60 foot, I'm going to go ahead and put down my 4x8 sheets of plywood to make sure I know exactly what I'm doing, to be sure that the 60 feet is going to be covered with the 4x8 sheets. So I made it to the end and found out, yep, that's exactly where they need to go. So then I decided, well, how many blocks do I need to put in? And I'm going to put the blocks in at every 3 pieces, which should be where it's at, and then one on each end. And then I put the posts in to make sure that the posts all look right before I go ahead and start to put my jig. So now that I've done this, I know that I'm all set and ready to go, and that I have the proper number of items that I need for each one of these. Okay, so again, this is where I found out I had 16-foot 2x4s cut, and I went, oh, they didn't need to be 16 foot because I calculated wrong. They just needed to be 12. So again, remember that they looked like they did as little cutting as possible. So by putting the 12-foot 2x4s on there, they'll go right between the 2 posts, and the 2x4s are actually just meant there as nailers for all the plywood anyway. So now that I've got this all figured out and I understand what I'm going to do, we can get ready to build the jig to make the walls. All right, so I went and cut out 12-foot pieces of lumber, and now what we're going to do is every 12 feet we're going to put in a post. I know this looks kind of strange the way that we're going to have to do this, but the thing is I've got to put down 12-foot pieces of lumber that go across here, because these are the walls and there's no single item that goes all the way across. So we're just taking the 12-foot 2x4s, laying them out, grabbing me a post, making sure the post is centered, 2x4 and squared up, and taped down. Okay, so here now I've set up my jig. What I'm doing is I'm actually using one of the I'm using 2x12s to make sure that I get the 2x12s on center, because there's only going to be a little bit of room for each one of these 2x4s to sit on. So this way it gives me the exact position that I need to place the post at. Right, what I'm using is I'm also using the little square that comes with the chop it, so that I can make sure that I've got those going square, that they're straight up and down. I then tape them down so that they're ready to accept what needs to come next. So we've got to lay them all out first, make sure that they're 12 feet, make sure that they're square. Once this is all done, then I'll be able to come back after the jig is done and make up the rest of my side wall. And then I've got to do it again for the next one. So what I'm doing here is with the ruler, making sure that the 2x4s are correct and making sure that there is a straight edge along the bottom for all of these to fit on, so that they are going to be square as best as possible. Now, these posts themselves are not cut to scale or anything like that. If you guys remember, these are all matchsticks, so they're going to come out the way that they come out. And so then we'll move on to the jig now. We're going to go ahead and put at least a couple of rows of 2x4s up here. Let me see, how many rows am I supposed to have? 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like 5 rows. So if I've got 5 rows, let's do math real quick. I need 1, 2, so 16 divided by 3, give me 1, 2, 3. So 1 in the middle, and 1 at the top. So we'll figure out where the middle is. So we'll put those 2 in first. Actually, middle should be right there. These should be 16 feet. Oh. Little pencil. So 16. And then we'll eyeball what halfway is between those. Okay, so next on the agenda is, and then we'll do the top portion. Okay, so I'm gonna do a bunch of gluing. Let me get my stuff that I can glue with. Hold on. Okay, so I'm using Aleene's tacky glue for this. And one of the nice things about the glass tabletop is I can put the glue right on top of it. I don't need to have another little dish or anything like that. Anything that's left over, I just take a knife and scrape it off later. So I dab each one of the 2x4's corners in the white glue that I have over there. Well, in this one, actually, I took an extra piece and went and made dabs down on it. Now, one thing I did find out a little bit later, when I went to go put this together, those probably should have been maybe a foot or so off of the bottom instead of right at the bottom. But it works. It's fine. So I put all the bottom ones on first, just to give it a little bit of strength and stability. It's not much. You got to remember, these are toothpicks being held by scale 2x4s. So we're not saying that we're driving in nails and all that, but it's much like the way that you would do it if it was a post and beam construction, right? You would put the posts up, the posts would be in the concrete, and then you'd come back and you'd nail 2x4s onto them, splitting the posts up. And then after you nail the 2x4s, you go ahead and put whatever substrate is that you're going to put on it. In this case, we're going to put in those kind of plywood stripes. So I'm just readjusting my tape to ensure that I have enough room to put all of my other 2x4s in. So remember, there's a 2x4 at the top and at the bottom. There's a 2x4 dead center. Sorry about that. There's a 2x4 dead center. And then there's another nailing 2x4 that goes at basically 4 feet on either side, so that we get a nice nailing area. So you nail the top of the plywood, the middle of the plywood, and the bottom of the plywood is the way the wall gets set up. So you'll see here that I did mark all of these at the 8-foot section, but then I came back just to make sure that it's all correct using pieces of plywood that'll eventually go on top of those, on top of the 2x4s. Okay, so if I get those set, now remember in the real world, it's the 4-inch piece that's going to be over, so there's going to be, 3.5 inches, so you want to try to split that as best possible. And that's what I'm trying to do here, is make sure that I'm splitting this so that I have as much much of the plywood holding out on the 2x2s as I possibly can. So when I go to form the wall will actually be stronger. In a sense, I wish I would have done this in time lapse, because when I did this, I recorded it on normal time. And so the best I could do with my software is just double time this. So even at double time, it's taking a while to do. And so you see, I finally got all the centers finished. The centers are the hardest parts to do. Now I go back and check the centers, make sure they're in the best place possible, because the tops, all I got to do is put the tops on. Here I'm coming up and just putting them about center between the two of them. It doesn't really matter because it's where they just get nailed to. And it's about at this point in time that I realize this is really boring to watch. And there's a lot of things that are going on here. And so I go ahead and finish off this video, stop it, and then take a couple of other ones with where I'm at the end. So this is all this is. It's just pieces of wood stuck together with the glue, making sure that they're in the right place all the way across, and taping them down. And I learned a little bit better on the second one to make smaller pieces of tape. It makes it easier. Okay, so there you have the first wall. The second wall is going to be the exact same thing. And then after I get the two wall sections built like this, then I will go ahead and cover them with the plywood. Then we'll put them together. This is going to be interesting. All right, we'll talk to you guys a little bit later. Okay. So there you have the second one. So now we've got the two sides built. Next up is probably to put these sides on their respective cement blocks, so that we can then try to get them at the correct angle. So you got to understand, there is no end walls on this. A truck just drives through the middle of this, so there are no end walls to per se, except for a 12-foot, except for the 12-foot 2-bys that go across at the rafters. It's the only place where we have any section. So that'll be the next step, I guess. We'll see. All right, just to show you guys what I'm doing here. All of these things that would be concrete pillars, and I'm doing the bigger ones first, actually have to be angled at the top. Let's see if you guys can see that. So here is the bottom. You can see it's nice and square. Turn it over, you can see that I have beveled the sides a little bit. Most of those are like that. So what we did was, I sent this is my sanding block, my shore sanding block. I sent this to a couple of degrees. I think it's like 12.5 degrees or something like that. And then we just simply come in here, pick a spot, And then just take the sanding block. The good thing about this sanding block is you just keep going back and forth with it. And it's got a groove pretty much that it stays in. And once it's all nice and flat, you get that curve. Okay, so here, let's see if I can show you guys. You can see there that there is a very, very, very slight angle to it. Back just a little bit. Okay, so now how do you make the pyramid? Well, you just do it on all four sides. So you set your first side, and then you know where that's going to be at, and then from there, you just keep sanding them. So I'm going to show you this one, since I did the last one. Let me just turn it again. It's 90 degrees. This is really, really hard on your fingers because you're trying to keep it square and at the same time give it a little bit of the angle that you want. So you're trying to keep the block square against the jig, and then you're trying to get it so that it will take its angle that you want to have. Come on, little guy. Okay, and it looks like I got two more sides to do. Yeah, that side never made it. Really? And I'm just kind of eyeballing this. If you think about it, it should be probably about a foot. And then there's the last one. And it's a lot easier trying to sand these, actually, than it is to, I just had to clean that off for you. And then there you go. It's got an angle all the way around. Okay. This one could use, let's see. No, that's about it. So I'm going to do all of these plus the other ones, and I'll get back to you. Okay, so that gets us with all of the material that we need to build these sidewalls. You can see it all stacked up here with my 12x12s. I cut 2x4s. I got the angles all cut on those. And so the next one, we're actually going to start finishing putting together the rest of the wall. This is Steve87 saying thanks for watching, and we'll bring out part 3 shortly.